these ones. Hello, everyone. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
Hello, can you hear us online?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear us online?
Yeah.
Test, test. Test. Is it working?
Yes, we can hear you. I don't know if you can hear us.
Hello? Hello, everyone. Welcome to our side event. The right to adequate food, tools for youth to ensure this right for all. I will be moderating this event. My name is Judy Kipkenda from Ogiek People of Kenya. I'm the United Nations Global Indigenous Youth Caucus co-chair. And I'll be representing the Indigenous young people. I'm very happy to be with you today. And today we will explore the fundamental human rights to adequate food, what this means, and how young people can promote its realization for everyone. I will now give floor to Oshin for a brief introduction for this event.
Thanks a lot, Judy. Good morning, everybody. Apologies, I'm not wearing a jacket. I just come from our school assembly with the younger students. So yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here with you all. My name is Ushin Gill. I'm leading the education program for the World Food Forum, and it's really great to sort of provide some opening remarks for this masterclass. It's titled "The Right to Adequate Food: Tools for Youth to Ensure This Right for All." This masterclass is the final masterclass in our Four Betters series that we launched this year. The Four Betters series masterclass outlines or follows the strategic framework of FAO. It starts off with better production and sort of realizing the tools for sustainable agriculture and improved efficient methods of producing. Then we move to better nutrition, ensuring our food meets the nutritional requirements required for people across the world. And then to better environment, ensuring that we minimize the harmful effects of agriculture and maximize the potential beneficial factors. And then finally here with a better life. All in all, leading to a better life. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor back over to Judy to introduce the session, and thank you all for being here.
So as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Right to Food guidelines, it is crucial to understand that food isn't a privilege. It's a basic human right that everyone everywhere is entitled to. This means everyone should have access to safe, diverse, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and cultural preferences. Our first speaker from the FAO Right to Food team will explain what right to food means, elaborate on the right to food guidelines, and discuss how youths can advocate and engage in shaping processes and policies for the implementation of the right to food. Welcome, Juan.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. My name is Juan Echanove, and I lead the Right to Food team here at FAO. And of course, you can guess that during this week, when we are celebrating the World Food Day, with a focus on the right to food, we are doing so many events. But by far, this is the most important one for me personally. You know why? Because we're always talking to each other. We're talking to people that is already working on this. But here is very different. Is you guys, as young people, you are interested on this thing. And what we are going to talk today is about you, because we are going to talk about your rights. So this is a conversation about yourselves, your rights, your entitlements. So with this, let me start. I have a PowerPoint here that I just put down. Great. Now, so what we're going to talk is about the right to adequate food and what it means for the new generations, for all of you. I will try not to keep it very technical, okay? And this is why, when I have to present what the right to food is, I often like to go to the very essentials, which to me is these two words that you see there, dignity and entitlement. Why dignity? Because this is basically something about respecting people, respecting choices of people, respecting culture of people, respecting identity of the people. And entitlement, because we are going to talk today, is not charity, it's not just that we are so good that we give something, is the right of every human being to be fed with adequate food. Okay, so this is the two words that if there is only one thing that you should retain about what the right to food is this. It's about dignity and it's about entitlement. Okay, this is like the harder slide in the presentation. I don't know if any of you are planning to study law or are familiar with that, so I will kind of skip it a little bit. The important thing for you guys to keep in mind is that the right to food is an internationally recognized human right. And it is recognized in the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Normally, when we talk about human rights, we talk about two different types of human rights. Civil and political rights, like your right to vote in elections, your right to be part of a union, your right to demonstrate in the street, and then economic and social rights, your right to have a job, your right to have health, your right to food, okay? And the legal instrument internationally that protects those rights is this international covenant that virtually every single country in the world has approved, has signed. So it's obligatory, respecting those rights in this covenant in every country of the world. And it's a very detailed right, this right to food, because on top of this international covenant, there is a committee in Geneva, a committee which is part of the UN, the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, that has defined in a general comment very much all the detailed obligations by the states to fulfill this right to food. But on top of that, there is also voluntary guidelines. There is recommendations for the governments on how to apply that right. And this is the voluntary guidelines to support the progressive realization of the right to food. Very long name, you can just call them the right to food guidelines. And they were approved in 2004. So right now, we are commemorating the 20th anniversary of these guidelines. And aside of that, we have other voluntary guidelines on specific topics very relevant to the right to food, like gender. I'm very glad that we have with us here some members of the gender team of the FAO, and I hope later they will see a few words. So we have a gender guidelines also. We have guidelines on tenure of land. We have guidelines on nutrition, etc. So we are talking about entitlement. So this is your right. Each and every of you have this right. So who has obligations? If you have a right, someone has an obligation. Primarily the state. And the state obligations are very clear. They have to respect this right. They have to protect this right, and they have to fulfill it. Respect means that the government cannot do something against the right. Protect means that if someone is not letting you exercise your right, like there is a big corporation, for instance, that is providing food which is not safe, the state has to intervene. And fulfill means that the state, the government basically, has to facilitate and to promote and to actually make sure that you will get food in case where there is no means for you to get that food in extreme situations. So by the right to food, we mean that there is this obligation, respect, protect, and fulfill, to make sure that the food is available, but also that it is accessible. And this is very important, economically accessible. It's not enough that food is there. It should be at prices that people can afford it, okay? And it has to be produced in a sustainable manner. So sustainability is a key factor here. And as I said before, it's not just any food. It's not just feeding the people. It's nutritious food. It's adequate, safe, food that will not poison you. It's culturally appropriate, adapted to your culture. So far, so good. The guidelines and the legislation, international legislation, the right to food, give a lot of attention to avoid discrimination and focus on vulnerable groups, whether those are women, youth, indigenous peoples, etc., right? And the word progressive that you see there is very important because we talk about the progressive realization of the right to food. It's not something that one country is going to solve from one day to another. Many countries in the world face tremendous challenges, but at least governments has to show intention to move towards its realization, okay? But there is a minimum obligation that every country should always respect, a core obligation of eliminating hunger. And this is very important. And let me add something also important. The right to food applies always. No one can take it out from you. It's your right, even in situations of conflict. And I'm saying this because as we are speaking, literally every hour, 10 people is killed in Palestine, and they are deprived of the right to access food because food aid cannot enter Gaza Strip and south of Lebanon. And it's not only in Gaza or Lebanon, it's also in Somalia and in many other countries. So the right to food also applies in situations of war, and no one can justify denying it because there is a war going on. International cooperation is fundamental. So governments do not only have the obligation to make sure that people in their own country can exercise the right to food. Also, other countries, richer countries, have the obligation to support countries in need. So when you see us, FAO, or the World Bank, or rich countries providing support, we may say we do it because we are nice, but you know what? We are obliged to do it, actually. And last but not least, individuals have the right of legal remedies, meaning that because it's a right, you are entitled to the possibility to go to a court to exercise that right. Of course, that can only happen if your country has integrated this right to food in its own legislation, okay? How to do it, I will not enter into details. I mentioned the voluntary guidelines. FAO has working for many years supporting countries in how to actually do this work of integrating the right to food. But it basically requires analyzing the main problems to access food in the country and to make food affordable, etc. Defining a legal framework, like for instance, including the right to food in the Constitution, defining policies, etc., and budget. I mean, because without money, what is the point in having legislation if government do not invest, right? And finally, participation of the civil society. This is also a requirement in international law. The right to food requires the civil society and all sectors of the civil society, including the youth organizations, to have a say on how this right is defined, monitored, and implemented. I think I can skip this one because I mentioned a little bit what our team is doing, supporting all these things. But let me now move to why the youth, why you guys are so important. I mean, I think numbers speak by themselves. You are the majority of this planet in numbers. In some countries, the immense majority of the population is below 15%, right? But there is an imperative, an economic imperative as well. Because in many parts of the world, youth is such an underutilized force because unemployment amongst the youth is so extremely high, right? But there is also a humanitarian imperative. You know who is dying the most in Gaza? Women, children, and the youth, because you are the majority. And there is a development imperative as well, because as I mentioned, the majority of the people, especially in the so-called developing countries, are young. Let's look into the practicalities of what means this right to food for the young people. And let's start with one example, which is youth and farming. Okay, look at this chart. You see here unemployment rates in different parts of the world. Blue is people ages 15 to 24. Green, is divided in males and females. And you can see how high unemployment is. So young people, unemployment rates are always very high. But then if you compare this table with this other one, which is what percentage of people in the world is working in farming, look at those less than 25 years old. Very few. This data is from Europe, sorry. The one before is global data. This is from Europe because unfortunately we don't have consolidated data for the whole world. But I can tell you it's pretty similar in many parts of the world. Why is that not that many young people is working into farming? Is it because they don't like it? Is it because they think it's not a good thing to make money out of? It's because there is lots of impediments. For instance, in African countries, in many African countries and many parts of the world, it's super difficult for the young people to get access to land. Without land, you cannot farm, right? Aside of that, young people tend to migrate to cities. Maybe they know they can make a life in the countryside, but in the villages, in remote areas, they do not have access to proper education. They do not have access to health. They do not have access to leisure, to culture, to entertainment, and you also want that. So you move to the city, so less young people living in the in the urban sites. So the right to food is challenged in terms of ability of the young people to do or to be active in the agricultural sector. And this is just one example among many. So with this, I will finish. And excuse me if I'm speaking too fast. I'm Spanish. So we have to respect cultures. And the culture of the Spaniards includes this feature of talking quite fast. But I will try to slow down. So when I think on what is the role that youth can play in terms of promoting the right to food, on the one hand, indeed, is this aspect of advocacy. You are literally the future. You are building how the world in the future will look like. So it's basically in your hands. We are going to pass away, but you still will be here, right? So you have to, or we have to give you the space for you to advocate for the right to food. And what that means, first and foremost, remember what I say. Promoting the idea that this is an entitlement. It's not charity. It's not that, countries has to be nice enough to support other countries or to feed their population. People has the right to have access to diverse food. But you're also agents of change by nature, right? Because you are innovative, because you can work with technologies in ways that we, older people, cannot, because you are really moving forward and fast. And that affects all aspects of food systems, right? For instance, when we talk about farming practices, young farmers are very much innovation driven. Also very important, the call towards healthier diets. I tell you, in many parts of the world, in North America, in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, it's basically the young people, it's the new generation which is asking for better food. You don't want to keep with this junk food that is, so popular these days. You are calling for healthier food. So keep that call up, advocate for that. And you are in the forefront of social movements. It's because of the push of the young generation why climate change in many regards is so predominant in the agendas now. So I wish there would be a global movement, and in many regards there is, and you are part of that here, sitting in this room today, a global movement of the youth for food justice, for the right to food. So this is basically it. I don't know if I did in my time, or if it took a bit longer or more. But again, thank you very much for dedicating time to this, because as I said, this is basically your right, what we are talking about. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Juan, for highlighting that the right to food shouldn't be a privilege for the lucky few, but right for all. Ladies and gentlemen, right next, I would like to introduce you to Ana Maria Maia from the Brazilian Institute of Consumer Protection. She is online. She will discuss how the rise of ultra-processed foods impact the right to adequate foods and how to empower youths and consumers to reclaim their right to choose healthy and culturally accepted food. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you for the welcoming. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'll share my screen and please let me know if you're seeing my presentation.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. So yeah, I'm Ana Maria. I'm from Brazil. I'm a nutritionist and I work as health specialist at the Institute for Consumers Defense. And today I'm going to share a little more about our actions to empower youth and consumers to reclaim the right to choose health and culturally acceptable diets. But I think that to begin, it's important to say who IDEC is. So it's a pleasure to present our organization for you. We have been working since 1987 and working for guidance, education, and defense of Brazilian consumers in terms of ethics and civil rights in their consumer relations. And in our daily activities, we help consumers in their lives, and we also work to ensure that laws, standards, and public policies favor our rights and ensure that everyone can access essential goods and service. Our team is organized in 7 different thematic programs. As I said, I work in the Health and Sustainable Food Program at IDEC, where we look for strategies and public policies to achieve the human right to adequate food. And we are a Brazilian organization, so we have our office. I have two offices in Brazil, one in São Paulo and the other one in Brasilia, the capital of the country, and where I am established. And to start talking about our actions, I think the first important thing to say is one of our most important values, that is the organization is free from conflicts of interests, understanding that consumers' right has to guide our actions and not private sector or industry's interests. So we are financed by Brazilian civil society that chooses to donate for us, and philanthropy projects which are free from conflict of interests. And I'll be more than pleased to talk about it in other opportunities, because now I would also like to talk about a pillar of our actions that is working in networks all around the world. As I said, IDEC is a Brazilian organization, but we work with networks from all around the world. One of them is Colanza, that I'm pleased to present here in this event. Colanza is a group of professionals, civil society organizations, and universities who work in a collaborative environment to contribute to the development of health, sustainable, equitable, and inclusive food systems, and to promote improvements in nutrition and health.
Just to know, your slides aren't moving if you want to move the slides, and they're not.
No, I'm moving here in my computer. I don't know why it's not moving for you. Can you please help me?
We can share from our side here if you want to let us know when to change to the next slide.
Okay, I'm the third slide, I think, the one which is talking about Colanza. Do you want me to stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Anna Maria. If you want to continue.
Yeah, actually is the one before that. Yeah, thank you so much. So as I was saying, IDEC is part of the coordinating committee of Colanza, and today it includes 14 countries, but we also include the participation of 29 organizations and more than 200 people reaching out our work. And working with Colanza is so important for us from Latin America and Caribbean region, because we have an important trajectory of discussions to build policies and narratives in order to guarantee the human right to adequate food. So this is such an important and valuable network for IDEC, and actually to push for advocacy actions, because we can gather civil society and universities and talk about what's happening in the countries of the region, and how can we push governments, how some strategy really work out for one country and didn't work out in other country, and how can we get together and push for better policies in order to guarantee our right to adequate food. And now, next slide, please. Talking about our work in the Health and Sustainable Food Program specifically, we fight for the right to know what we eat and for policies that allow us to make better choices for our health and the planet. Next, please. And it's important to mention that in Brazil, the human right to adequate food is contemplated in the Brazilian Federal Constitution, and it encompasses two dimensions, because we're not talking just about people not being free from hunger, but we are also talking about having access to adequate and healthy food. And here is important to mention that to guide our actions to guarantee this human right, we have an important document that is the dietary guidelines for the Brazilian population. Here you have the QR code that directs you to the document in English. And this is a Brazilian document that acknowledges the role of the food food environment and food choices, and makes recommendations to avoid ultra-processed foods and to overcome obstacles to the adoption of health eating habits, serving as an important instrument for orienting policies and practices. So this is a document that for us at TEDx, it's very important, and we work advocating for the implementation of this document too, in order to guarantee the human right to adequate food. And in Brazil, we also have a system where different sectors from the government and civil society sits together to build intersectoral policies, understanding that to guarantee this right, it's not enough actions from health sector or agriculture sector or environmental sector, but all of them have to sit together and build integrated policies. So in Brazil, we have the systems that allow us to sit with the government and civil society and universities to talk about better policies and monitoring of the policies and actually reaching out the food consumption of the population and nutritional state of our people. And IDEX is actually a member of this council that discuss these questions. Next slide. And understanding that the environment in which people live, study, and work is one of the determinants of the food consumption and can promote or hinder access to healthy food. We are really working, advocating for regulatory measures in Brazil. The first one of them that IDEC has an important role for the approval of the measure in Brazil, it's the front of package labeling, guaranteeing the consumers the information of what they are buying and they are eating. We also defend the restricted advertising of unhealthy foods, the regulation of food sales in school environment, considering the schools an important space to build eating habits and learning how to eat good food, and also the taxation of unhealthy food products. Now, Brazil is passing through a tax reform in the national level, and we're reaching out to this discussion, and we really expect that the taxation for unhealthy food products is going to be adopted in the country. Next slide. And understanding that regulatory measures are important, but they are not enough, we are also advocating for access to healthy foods. This year, we had a huge successful approval in the country. It's the approval for the basic food basket. I don't know if you know this strategy in public policies, but the basic food basket is also a right guaranteed in our constitution, and it aims to reduce the price of basic and health food to guarantee the right to food and promote food and nutrition security, especially to the most vulnerable population. So we have a list of healthy food where we can give subsidies and financial subsidies for people to buy them, so we can make the access to this food better for the population, and other policies of production and access to adequate and healthy food. Next slide. And just to end a little bit of my speech, I would like to highlight that we have been talking to consumers in order to amplify our voice and guarantee our rights. And we have as pillars working on mass media campaigns. And I brought here some images of what we are doing in mass media campaigns, talking about meat consumption, ultra-processed food, and some strategies in the agriculture. We also are working on the translation of the Academy's knowledge production for public managers and decision makers, making meetings with these decision makers and explain to them the importance of the measures to be implemented of the country in order to guarantee our right, and advocating to mobilize public managers. That is, can you please go to the next slide? And this is the last one. I would like to thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, sharing our actions, and I'll be available for a question in the end of the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ana Maria, for sharing the amazing work that you're doing in Brazil. And thank you for touching on the adequacy and accessibility aspects of the right to food. You've as well highlighted the important advocacy underway by consumer organizations for the right to adequate food in Brazil. Thank you so much. Different needs require different actions and approaches. The specific circumstances of all must be considered. This includes the rights and experiences of indigenous peoples, comprising around 476 million people around the world. There is so much that can be learned in relation to their traditional food systems. Targeted actions must ensure the preservation and realization of the right to food. Our next speaker, Maithin Yumon from the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus, and Simran Rashmi from the Indigenous Global Confederation will explore the cultural acceptability of food for Indigenous peoples and how it relates to food, to the right of food. Welcome,
Thank you, Judy. And thank you to the previous speakers, because you have already, I think, covered a lot. And so left very little points for us to discuss and share. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, to correct our names. We are here representing Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. And this is the caucus that has been there since 2008. And we basically organize ourselves mainly at the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, which happens every year in April in New York. And now we are expanding, and now we feel home to FAO. And we have like every 2 years, every other years, we have like jointly with FAO Indigenous Peoples Unit, we have Global Indigenous Youth Forum every 2 years. So we both are from Asia. And so we have 8 minutes, so we will try to manage the time, because Indigenous peoples are storytellers. You know, we love to tell stories. So 8 minutes is a little bit risky in managing, but we'll try our best. One also asked questions like, why is this percentage of young people under 25 or even under 35 is still very low, who do farming, who are involved in this agriculture. I would like to start by sharing my own example. When I finished my master's, I was 22, so I'm counted in there, under 25, and we had a trip. I was serving as an interpreter, freelance interpreter, and I accompanied a group of consumer rights activists and community leaders to Penang Island. And so, like, after having this training with like organic and all the rights to food and so on, I was so motivated. And when I went back to the city, to my country, I went back to my community. I just packed and left the city. And I was there, and now I'm here because my dad is a farmer, and I was so proud. I have always been very proud, and I've spent my life, like since I was in grade 6, when I was like 11 to 12 years old, I already spent like 1 or 2 days every week in the farm, helping the family, as well as like most of our activities, our celebrations and our family work together. Like we have very big farms. So I was very proud after coming from that consumer rights training. But then when I was home, my dad told me, pack your things, leave at once. I was 22. And the other thing he told me was that I sent your siblings to school because I want you to be free from the hardships that farmers are going through. So you don't belong here, and you belong to those prestigious office related, jobs. So not being able to say no, I left home. And of course, I'm grateful when looking back, because that gave me a chance to work in a different capacity with many indigenous communities, and facilitating different platforms for indigenous youth and women. But I told my dad in 2021 that, Dad, I'm back. I'm sorry, because I was named a food security champion of the 2021 Food System Summit. So no choice. I'm sorry, you can't deny me this time, because the UN itself now recognized me. So I mean, he was happy, and and we did a lot of work together, even like until the coup happened in my country, which stopped most of our activities on the ground. So it is very like a very big challenge, even if we want to. There are so many challenges, and sometimes there is no incentive at all. In some communities, of course, it was around 12, 13 years ago. So, but now, I mean, there have been increasing like discussion as well as investment and motivation to provide incentives for young people, but still it's still a lot to do. So especially for indigenous peoples, when we talk about food, yeah, there are different dimensions where you calculate on whether this person is fulfilled with food security. Is this person or is this family secure in terms of food, or do they have right to food? But then for indigenous peoples, access can mean like much broader, because we have very holistic approach to food, and there are many different dimensions that is involved in food. So it is not just the one that comes in your plate, or that comes from the kitchen to the plate, but in all the steps, it's a very long and very broad scopes are there. So for us to have the right to food, we need our right to land. So when we talk about land, people say, yeah, of course you need land. But for indigenous peoples, we have very unique and of course very complicated for outsiders when they come into our some people some people might see this as very chaotic way of management, and it's very hard for people from outside to understand. But then there are, of course, when we look at all the social cultural regions, it's very, how should I say, diverse. We have very diverse ways of managing our land and our forests, our water. Of course, we also have huge indigenous people's presence and custodianship of oceans and our sea, of course. So when we talk about the right to food, whether we have this right to food, then the questions will be whether we already have our right to land and our right to forest, because wild vegetables, fruits, as well as herbs that you cannot grow, if you bring them in the lab, then they will be gone. But then they survive. They can live only in those management systems, as well as in those specific geographical areas, as well as these resources with the existing resources. So our forests mean a very big component of our food. So we cannot only talk about food, but we have to talk about indigenous people's food system as a system, because it has very how should I say, very dynamic as well as very rich. It comprises very rich knowledge, resources, and governance systems, as well as the people. With climate also, of course, because indigenous peoples, when we start farming, I spent like 5-6 years with farmers in the community in the northwestern part of Myanmar. And I was surprised by how these elders can really tell weather in ahead without using any technology. They don't use it. They have this antenna here, which we have inherited from our ancestors. So it is built in. Now and we see a lot that, well, we can take these indigenous people's knowledge and build as a but when you take away from those land and those territories, then the meaning and as well as the impact is gone. So it is very important that these practices, these knowledge systems are allowed to be maintained, to be preserved, to be practiced. So only then we will be able to secure our right to food. What have we been doing as Indigenous youth? Well, I think we have been the youth for the past 20 years. I think Indigenous youth have been the ones who suffer severely from this globalization, and as well as we already we have inherited this intergenerational trauma as well as resilience, of course, but then globalization and all these technology surge, it imposes very huge challenges for us. But then at the same time, we are thriving, and we also found out that we are the best bridge for how should I say, for the mainstream society as well as the Western science and these decision-making bodies to understand our people and our knowledge systems, which can not only bring our right to food, but as well as our well-being overall. So there are a number of initiatives taken by Indigenous youth to revitalize our food systems, our knowledge, our seeds, and we have very good example here. We have a very good example here, Judy, which was named, and we are very proud of her. And many other young Indigenous women and men are doing our best as much as we can. So we do need allies, support, and friends, and we do welcome you to join hands with us to bring the not just the right to food, but to revitalize the well-being of our Mother Earth together. Thank you so much.
To everyone. My sister also said that a lot of give the lot of reflection. I'm not repeating that, but I'm only tell my experience. It's short, not long. When I'm in my childhood, my mother gives me ragi. It is type of millet, and it is like a chila and mix with the water and make me in the pan and chila, and I'm taking to the school in my lunch box. And when I share my non-indigenous people, and he looked and he said, oh, it's black, uh, we don't eat, my skin color is also get black. Oh, no, 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 not, don't take, don't eat. And that time I'm also not eat because I feel bad. And I'm said to my mother, mom, don't give me, I'm not eating anytime. I'm not getting fair. I'm also look ugly. That type of talking, because I'm childhood, so I'm that type of talking with my mother. But I grew and understand what is the importance of millet. Because if you eat ragi, it's a type of millet, and in your daily basis, you would never get diabetic. Never. And that is the powerful of the indigenous food. And sometimes other people's not understand what knowledge indigenous people have, and it also making a joke on it. But I'm also said that if we said that the right of food, right of everyone, but yeah, just my sister said right to land, because we have no land, we have not practiced that traditional thing, traditional knowledge, and it go in a vain. So I'm not talking about so much because my sister already said. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, my sister. And just to insist on what you've said, the indigenous people's foods are very diverse, and those same foods are very much tagged to our identity and culture. And if you are denied the right to enjoy our foods, to produce our foods, it amounts to being denied our right to food. Thank you so much for highlighting how by protecting the right to food, we can also safeguard the rights of indigenous peoples, foods and knowledge systems, and the actions that indigenous youths are taking for the right to adequate food for all. So our final speaker will be Tiffany Marcel. Thank you so much for joining us from the Agricultural Alliance of the Caribbean. She will discuss the role of young people in sustainable production of fresh and healthy foods to promote the right to food. Welcome, Marcel.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So my name is Tiffany Marcel, and I represent an agricultural group called ACARI. ACARI is the Agricultural Alliance of the Caribbean. It's across a few Caribbean countries, and essentially it's an umbrella organization that houses different farmer organizations, farmer groups, farmer co-ops. Through my work with ACARI and their partnership with the World Rural Forum, I am a member of the World Rural Forum Family Farming Youth Core Group. That's a mouthful. But since ACARI is an umbrella organization, I am a part of a smaller agriculture group on the island of Dominica, where I'm from, the native name being Waiti Kubuli. Dominica, not to be mistaken with the Dominican Republic. It's also located in the Caribbean, and we farm within the central region of the island. Now, Dominica is a very interesting island in the Caribbean because, one, it is located in what we have known as the Hurricane Belt. Two, it is the youngest island in the Caribbean, which means currently we have 9 active volcanoes on island. And in addition to that, it's a very mountainous island, which means a lot of farmers tend to farm on the sides of hills and the sides of mountains. But the mountains play an important part in our history and the culture of Dominica, because we are the only Caribbean island with an indigenous population left, because they were able to hide in the mountains during the time of the European invasion. And so it's very important the way that the island is formed geographically. Even though it makes us very vulnerable, it played a part in protecting who we are. So the role of young people in agriculture. So the importance of local and sustainable production. Sustainable production practices protect the environment and ensure future food supply. So currently, as mentioned before, there's an aging farming community in the Caribbean. The average age of a farmer is 65 and upwards, and we don't have a lot of youth being involved in the agricultural sector. But we need youth to be involved in the agricultural sector, because otherwise we don't have people to pick up the production of food. And if we don't have people to pick up the production of food, then we're forced to import foods. Now, we're a small island and we have limited resources. So if we import foods, we only have a specific budget for that. We're going to opt to import foods that are cheaper, and oftentimes foods that are cheaper are unhealthier foods. In the Caribbean, we have an issue with non-communicable diseases, so diabetes, high blood pressure. And the issue is that our right to food is being taken away from us, partly because youth aren't being involved in agriculture, and we're forced to import these foods that aren't that great. and it contributes to our health sector. So I like to say that agriculture is everybody's business because it touches a bit on every sector within our government, right? Agriculture is related to our health. Agriculture is related to education. Agriculture is related to finances. And currently in the Caribbean, there is a 25 by 25. So that is, we're trying as a Caribbean community to reduce our import bill by 25% by the year 2025. There has been motion made towards it. I don't think we'll meet the goal by next year, but at least there's an initiative to push forward for us to reduce those things that we import. Local food systems reduce dependency on imports and foster community resilience. So again, we do have, instead of importing things like chips, Lay's, we have cassava, we can make cassava chips. We have dasheen, also known as taro in other parts of the world. We can make taro chips. We can use these things to make flour instead of importing flour because we can't grow wheat in the Caribbean. We can make plantain flour because plantain is something that we do have. And then essentially youth involvement is crucial for the innovation and the continuity. So we have a lot of youth involved or wanting to be involved in adding value to these products, but not necessarily wanting to grow the products themselves. In terms of how we can promote this sustainability, we can adopt modern eco-friendly farming methods. We can also use technology to enhance productivity. So things like drones, different agricultural practices like raised beds, different ways in which we can harvest waters in different parts of the island, and then also creating sustainable business models for fresh and healthy food production, right? So we want to ensure that the foods that we're growing are the things that we're using for production. We don't need to import things in order for us to process them and further tarnish our health from what it currently is. So challenges that our young farmers currently face within the Caribbean. The picture that I have up here is a picture from not a climatic event, but as a result of 2 hours of rain. This wasn't a hurricane. This wasn't a tropical storm. This was outside of the hurricane season. It was a day with 2 hours of rain and we had a whole mountain slide off into a river, right? Climate is changing, and in the Caribbean, as small islands, we contribute very little to greenhouse gases and the things that affect climate change, but we are severely impacted by the decisions made by other people in terms of hurricanes. And so that is an extreme difficulty, is extreme weather events threaten crop yields. The area in the top corner is actually a farm. Some of the areas were able to sustain themselves because we have an indigenous crop or an indigenous type of grass called vetiver, and it has deep roots. And so essentially it was able to hold up the soil in different areas. But it's something that we have moved away from because we don't continue the information and the teaching of our history. In addition to that, agriculture is viewed as a fallback due to our historical legacy, right? In the Caribbean, people that look like me, people who aren't indigenous to the Caribbean, we were brought to the Caribbean during the slave trade. And oftentimes, because of that history of forced farming, people don't see agriculture as a need. It's actually seen as something that you'll fall back on if you don't do well in school. It's actually, there's a negative connotation associated with agriculture because of our history with agriculture and the forced nature of it. In addition to that, it's difficult in everywhere in the world to access land and access finance in order for us to continue those agricultural practices for those of us who are involved and want to continue. I think moving forward, I have some solutions and opportunities. So one, promote agriculture as a viable and rewarding career option. We have to find innovative ways in introducing youth to agriculture and showing them the importance of it and seeing how it's related to every aspect of their life. Also providing more training and mentorship and financial support. So working with banks to come up with schemes to provide funding for young farmers and at zero interest cost or giving them enough time to pay back some of these loans. in addition to that, mentorship from other farmers or from organizations in terms of how we can advocate for ourselves from a policy standpoint. So advocating for policies that support young farmers and encourage land ownership. I have been here over the course of a few days and I've heard a lot of countries talking about national plans and for family farming, and we do not have that in the Caribbean. So how can we push forward for national plans or national initiatives or policies that's related to family farming, specifically as it relates to young people, because we do not have that. We have some things put in place. So certain agricultural products you might get tax-free, but being here is really a learning experience to see how forward everybody is in terms of family farming when it comes to agriculture, and see how we can put ourselves within that realm as well. And then finally, creating programs that integrate technology and modern farming techniques. The picture that I showed before here was actually taken by a young farmer during a training that was done by ICA, which is the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. They showed us how to use drones. And he was actually first on the scene when this had happened. He was able to take pictures. He was able to go there and help farmers, help people gather their bearings and see if they could move to different areas. And an area like this, currently, they're trying to move people and move them out of that rural area and into urban housing because it's being viewed as an area that's so vulnerable that people shouldn't be there. But there's a way to fix things like this or prevent things like this from happening. We don't have to move individuals out of rural areas and overcrowd urban areas in order for people to have the right to live, the right to food, the right to housing. And then finally, I would also like to advocate for having an International Day for Young Farmers. So having a day dedicated to us so that we can come and discuss our difficulties, and also so people can see us as key players within the agricultural sector and within the family farming sector. And so with that, I would like to conclude with a quote from the Director General. We need collective action to drive change, especially from youth, because a food secure future is a right. We have a right to food, right? Because we're in the Caribbean and it's oftentimes we're grouped with Latin America, which is much larger than us. And we somehow get drowned out because they're so large. It's important for people from very small places, for people from unknown places to have a right to food, to have a right to a future, because a right to food is a right to our future. So thank you.
Wow. That was really, really insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. And thank you young people are powerful actors of change. That is so clear, according to your story. We represent the future and we can be active participants in the transformation of our food systems towards a sustainable future and to end hunger and malnutrition in all its forms. So the next session will be question and answer. We'll have 10 minutes starting now.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentations. Thank you for having an event on the right to food. I wanted to ask a question about food security in the narrative of FAO. Because I think as youth, I see many people interested into food, agriculture, but the first thing they get in touch with is food security, because that's the thing they hear the most. And if you want to look into the right to food, you have to dig it up for yourself. You have to look. So I'm wondering how we can put the agenda of the right to food more in advance, and that because FAO in their constitution, when they got created, they had the right to food. But since then, they sort of insist more on the food security. And I think it's important that food security should be based on the right to food. And I want to ask your opinion on how to talk more about the right to food, and how from institutions like the FAO, but also how to talk more about the right to food and to to put it as like, okay, it's all right. And when we talk about food security, it has to be based on the right to food.
Thank you for that question, but maybe before addressing this, I really want to go for a further round of applause to the three of you, because it has been by far the best speeches I have here in 1 week here. And thank you for that question, because it's a very good one. It's true. You go into documentation of FAO, and not only FAO, World Food Program and other donors, World Bank, whatever, and it's all about food security, right? Food security is neutral. It's saying nothing. It's just a scientific word to describe a stage, a situation. That's what it is. It's not politically charged. And right to food is politically charged. It has a political weight because it's entitlement, it's right, it's the power that the three wonderful young people here are trying to share with us. And honestly, I think that's the reason why you don't hear that much about it, because at the end, UN organizations belongs to the countries. And we are talking about entitlement, and we are talking about obligations by countries. So that's why. But indeed, I think we have to put it back forward in the front line, because as you said, it's in our constitution. It's the reason why we exist, UN, to promote human rights. That's the very reason why we exist.
So I also want to just thank you again for such an amazing session. I want to ask a question about getting to this point of the right to food and leveraging our collective power. I see so much power and action and motivation and drive amongst so many of us, of like-minded people. But I think we also have to acknowledge that the context that we operate in is difficult to say politely. Even now I have to censor the word that I'm using, right? And that's the word that I want to get to. How can we support, how do you think that it could be more effectively, that we can support youth more effective, that we can support organizations like the organizations in Brazil as well, all of these different collective forms of collective action to achieve the right to food, to challenge the lack of transparency in institutions at either public sector level or these grand institution levels, so that we can challenge the censorship that happens and create, a real accountability for change, so that it's a bottom-up action that is empowered through the institutions that are meant also to advance this. My own background is from Borinquen in the Caribbean, so this is something that is very close to my heart as well. The fact that these challenges fall upon the smallest states, and yet we are often the ones that have the smallest voice as well. So my question is, in your opinion, how do you think that we can challenge censorship and increase accountability? What would you see as the most useful way to get that happening, such as a day for the young farmers, for example, or something? Thank you.
So I do think the Day for Young Farmers is a start, but even though it's a start, sometimes we put these things in place and we come for a day and we celebrate and we say it's a day for young farmers, and then nothing happens after that. So sometimes when we say we need help, people often think, well, they need financial help and we can't afford to do so. We need more than financial help. We need international voices. So when our governments come to places like FAO, they said, well, hey, there was a young person here trying to advocate for a change. What are you doing about this? Because sometimes coming from young voices or small voices, people or our governments are sometimes apprehensive to helping. And also sometimes they're in positions where they cannot even help us. So when we say we need help, it's not always financial help. Sometimes we need advice. Sometimes we need ways to see how we can help ourselves. If you are aware of doing something in a climate-friendly way, can you inform us? Can you teach us? If you don't have funding, but you know of where I can get funding, can you advise me? If you have certain things in place in your own country and you think it might be beneficial at a smaller scale for small scale farmers, can you inform me? So sometimes information is just as important as the financial aspect. And coming and speaking at these events is also important because you might have not known where Dominica was before today, but you can say, hey, I met someone and these are the challenges that they're having. Maybe we can contact them and see how we can help. So I think it's important to, at any opportunity you get to have your voice heard, let it be heard. Because somebody might not be able to help you financially, but they might have the information that can help you get to where you need to be.
Can I contribute to this answer, please? Can you listen to me?
For you?
Yeah, thank you. I really would like to answer this question because I think that I could like to highlight the importance of us strengthening the working coalitions. I really believe in the power of us being together and building narratives together, especially in the region, especially in Latin America. I really understand the specific points from small countries and big countries. I'm from Brazil, a big country, a huge country, and I really think we need to look to this point that specific countries, but working in coalition and understanding our problems, I think that it's a really important thing we have to do and push for it, for the strengthening of the coalitions in the region. The importance of education and mobilization of civil society, of talking about it with youth everywhere as possible, and really invest in actions of education and mobilization, and push for instruments of accountability and civil society participation in the space of public policies, organizations, and discussions. We have to be at the table talking about our needs and what we're seeing, about the impacts we're seeing to our population, to our rights, to food security. So we really have to push for being in this space to build policies. And I think at some point we will have to discuss about conflict of interests and the interest of industry being more seen and heard than the interest of civil society and the population. So I think this is one discussion that we really need to advance, and I really hope that UN system can help us to advance in this discussion. Thank you.
I think, yeah, most of the solutions have been shared. I think that it is very important for us youth is to understand how these things work. I think we need to get into the politics of it, because sometimes they look so complicated and we are so overwhelmed by these systems. Like when you come into the FAO, you're like looking at the flags, the big building, and all these white people in suits and coat, you know. Sometimes like, okay, well, maybe we can, what we can do is more like side or things, but we can be much more powerful than that. But without like taking step back, we need to like, and like, for example, in my country, like when the peace process was going on, now it's war. So what the most important decisions in the peace process, in agreement, get made at the beer tables. That's what we learned after engaging like a lot. So sometimes these meetings, big meetings, seem very important, but to get those big decisions on those big tables, we need to make many friends like Juan and like Oshin and many other in the system who have like from different directions who can support us. I think we really need friends and allies who can drive in the system already. And that's how we also as Indigenous peoples work on our rights and movement. So I totally agree that many times when we go back to our community and in our country especially, but like they might not listen, the elders might not listen, and we might not be at the decision table, but we have different cards that we can use. So as Juan rightly mentioned earlier, that food is very much political. So we need to start learning. We cannot just see like a small scope of like I think I would encourage us to see like how the whole system works and where would be the entry points and who can support us and how to connect these and connection again. So like let us see all of these different actors that we can make allies and all of them. So, and just to briefly touch on the previous question, I think, yeah, like food security, it becomes like food security, I think it becomes very much like humanitarian word and very neutral. And so everyone enjoys talking about it. But like we have heard from everyone and also throughout the week that we cannot stand at that food security, but we need to aim for the food sovereignty. Because we need to decide what we want to eat, how we want to get it, and how we try to get those and how we maintain all these systems work. So I think we need to aim for food sovereignty. Then I think that will bring us closer to the right to food, actually. So that's what thank you.
Thank you very much. It was really, really nice to hear you. Before giving the floor to Charlie, because he was moderating online and maybe people online have some questions, I just wanted to say, I just have a comment, is that probably all of us know, but like few corporations are controlling the food market, as this corporations are the same that probably supporting what's going on in Gaza and in Lebanon right now, the same that are supporting the consumption of ultra-processed food. So my question was like, what are the tools for youth to counteract that? And also like maybe for Anna, this one, do you have any specific programs to for youth, like to engage youth, and do you have any specific programs to avoid that in terms of ultra-processed food? And then we need to close, and I give the floor to Charlie. Thanks.
Yeah, I can talk about it. It's really hard to fight against these conflicts of interest, but in IDEC, as I said, we have a specific policy for financing in our organization, and we actually are working with the National Council for Food Security in Brazil, which has participation from the government and civil society. So we are discussing about conflicts of interest in the food security policy in Brazil, so we can make those industries far from a little bit far. It's hard, but they can see it in the table for building the public policy, and we're trying to discuss this here. And we're actually working very closely to PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, who already has an instrument for identification of conflicts of interest in some situations, in the building of policies. But I think, and actually, it's an important instrument, but I don't think we have all the answers. And as a civil society organization, we are really also working on making some documents where we can expose the actions of these industries in Brazil. I'm sorry, I don't know if you're listening, but I have a kid in home. I'm doing home office, so I'm so sorry about it. I hope you're listening to me. And so the last thing I want to say is that we are making we are turning the interference of industry in the public policies in Brazil. We are turning them documents, so you can take this to the government and we can talk about it in a more open way and say that what's not working for the advance of the public policies and this interference process. But we still don't have a formation We will start a formation program for the people who work in the public administration in Brazil. We will launch this in the next year. We are working with the government to do this, so it's one of the initiatives, but nothing specifically to the youth.
At this point, I'll leave the floor to Charlie from the Consumers International, who has been moderating online, to pose the question to the online participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judy. I'm not sure we have time for a question from online. I think we need to wrap up, is what I'm hearing. But just wanted to say that we've had a lot of really great interaction online, more than 60 attendees still, even as we run over, still in the session. I really enjoyed it. Lots of great comments about how amazing the speakers have been and how much everyone's learned from the session. So yeah, just wanted to say again, thank you to all the panelists and to everyone involved in organizing a really great session.
Great. Thanks a lot, Charlie. Thank you, Judy. Thank you to all our speakers, to Juan, to Maitin, to Simran and Tiffany and Anna Maria. Yeah, so we have run out of time, unfortunately, but yeah, just like I think Juan, you probably wrapped it up best when you said that, yeah, it was one of the most inspiring speakers and panelists that we've had that I've seen this week. And that's what the World Food Forum is about, is giving you showcase in the space to share these ideas in your work. So thank you very much.